G'day, how's it going? Today I'm going to make some gnocchi. My preferred potatoes for gnocchi are agria, and that's what I've got here. So after you've cleaned and peeled the potatoes, cut them into pieces about 3 or 4 centimetres across. If they're too big when they cook, they'll become waterlogged on the outside while undercooked in the middle. Too small and they tend to turn to mush as well. Boil them until a fork can be inserted and comes out easily, but before they start to break apart. Once they start breaking up, they'll absorb a lot more water, and we want the mash to be as dry as possible. Once cooked, drain them well and return them to the pot. Cook them a bit longer to dry them out some more. Then, while they're still hot, it's time to mash them. I use a moulie or a food mill, but a potato ricer will also work well. Or you could just push them through a sieve. At a pinch you could use a potato masher, but only if you don't have the other options. Potato mashers will always leave a few lumps. Potato mashers also tend to squash and work the potatoes too much, which makes the starch break out of the cells and can produce a sticky mash. Again, something we don't want here. So the first thing to think about when making gnocchi are the potatoes. The best results come from spuds with a high starch content rather than the waxy ones. High starch potatoes, like agria and Ilam Hardy, have densely packed starch cells that swell and separate from one another when cooked, resulting in a dry, fluffy texture. On the other hand, low starch potatoes, like nadine, have moister, loosely packed starch cells that don't separate from one another. So these potatoes retain their shape better, even when they're boiled. It's also best to use old potatoes, as new potatoes have less starch because they are harvested young before all their sugars have converted into starch. So late autumn to the end of winter is usually when you'll get the best results. So now we've produced some perfectly fluffy and lump-free mashed potato. Leave it in the bowl to cool down a bit. It doesn't have to be cold, but cool enough to handle. Now add the salt. I like a bit of nutmeg, but other flavours can work well. Add the flour. The quantity of flour will vary a bit every time, so there's no absolute amount here. But as a ballpark figure, I'd say account for about 1 cup of flour for 600 grams of peeled potatoes. Don't add it all at once though, just mix it in gradually until you've got the right consistency. Too little flour and the gnocchi will fall apart when you boil them. Too much flour and you'll end up with chewy little dough balls. We want them to stick together and be light and soft. At least if you add too much flour, they'll still be edible, unlike the ones with too little flour that will fall apart. So if in doubt, add a little more flour. You need enough flour that the dough comes together into one lump without bits breaking off easily. We also want the dough to be quite soft and pliable. Don't knead it too much, just enough to incorporate the flour. Kneading it will develop the gluten and make them tough and chewy. To test, you could have a pot of boiling water and pop a little ball in to see what happens. If it falls apart, you'll know to add a bit more flour. Once you're happy with the dough, shape it into a log and cut it into slices. It should cut easily, and the cut surface should have this nice feathered look to it, which indicates the right amount of flour has been added. Now roll each of those slices into long, skinny ropes and cut into pieces about 2 centimetres long. Then roll each of those pieces into balls. Once they're all rolled, it's time to shape them. Gently push and roll the balls across a fork to make ridges on one side and an indentation on the other side. Place them with the ridge side up so they retain their shape. Keep everything nice and floured to stop them sticking to each other or the bench. Once you've shaped them all, it's time to cook them. Gently place about a dozen or so at a time into a pot of boiling water. Do this in small batches so they can move around in the water easily and not stick together. When they come to the surface and stay there, they're done. Again, gently, these things are delicate. Lift them out of the water and place them on a tray in one layer. If you pile them on top of each other, they'll squash and lose their shape. Pour over a bit of olive oil to stop them sticking. Now they're ready to eat, and you can serve them however you like. Here's a few ways we've had them. Here they are in a cheesy sauce with cooked sausage and broccoli. My personal favourite, in a soupy stew. Or in a cheese sauce and with a stew. Anyway, that's all for today, folks.